Hey there! Are you exploring test automation? Are you wondering why everyone is talking about Selenium around you? Do you want to know what Selenium is all about? If yes, this is the video for you. Simplilearn brings to you a very simple tutorial on Selenium. What should you expect from this video? Before you start understanding any automation tool, it's good to look back into what manual testing is all about, what are its challenges, and how automation tool overcomes these challenges. Challenges are always overcome by inventing something new. So let's see how Selenium came into existence and how did it evolve to become one of the most popular web application automation tool. Selenium suite of tools. Selenium is not a single tool. It has multiple components. So we will look into each of them. And as you know, every automation tool has its own advantages and limitations. So we will be looking at what the advantages are and the limitations of Selenium and how do we work around those limitations. Alright, so let's get started. Manual testing. A definition, if you can say, a manual testing involves the physical execution of test cases against various applications. And to do what? To detect bugs and errors in your product. It is one of the primitive methods of testing a software. This was the only method which we knew of earlier. It is execution of test cases without using any automation tools. It does not require the knowledge of a testing tool. Obviously, because everything is done manually. Also, you can practically test any application since you're doing a manual testing. So let's take an example. So say we have a use case. You are testing, say, a Facebook application. And in Facebook application, let's open the Facebook application and say create an account. This is your web page which is under test now. Now as a tester, what would you do? You would write multiple test cases to test each of the functionalities on this page. You will use multiple data sets to test each of these fields like the first name, the surname, mobile number, or the new password. And you will also test multiple links. What are the different links on this page? Like say forgotten account or create a new page. So these are the multiple links available on the web pages. Also, you look at each and every element of the web page, like your radio buttons, like your drop-down list. Apart from this, you would do an accessibility testing. You would do a performance testing for this page, or say a response time after you say click on the login button. Literally, you can do any type of tests manually. Once you have these test cases ready, what do? You start executing these test cases one by one. You will find bugs, your developers are going to fix them, and you will need to rerun all these test cases one by one again until all the bugs are fixed and your application is ready to ship. Now, if one has to run test cases with hundreds of transactions or the data sets and repeat them, can you imagine the amount of effort required in that? Now that brings us to the first demerit of the manual testing. Manual testing is a very time consuming process and it is very boring. Also, it is very highly error prone. Why? Because it is done manually and human mistakes are bound to happen. Since it's a manual execution, tester's presence is required all the time. One needs to keep doing manual steps, step by step again all the time. He also has to create manual reports, group them, format them so that we get good looking reports. Also send these reports manually to all stakeholders. Then collection of logs from various machines where you have run your test, consolidating all of them, creating repositories and maintaining them. And again, since it's all is a manual process, there is a high chance of creating manual errors there. Scope of manual testing is limited. For example, let's say regression testing. Ideally, you would want to run all the test cases which you have written. But since it's a manual process, you would not have the luxury of time to execute all of them. And hence, you will pick and choose your test cases to execute. That way, you're limiting the scope of testing. Also, working with large amount of data manually is impractical, which could be the need of your application. What about performance testing? You want to collect metrics on various performance measures as a part of your performance testing. You want to simulate multiple loads on application under test, and hence manually performing these kind of tests is not feasible. And to top it all up, say if you're working in an agile model where code is being churned out by developers, testers are building their test and they're executing them as and when the builds are available for testing. And this happens iteratively. And hence, you will need to run this test multiple times during your development cycle. And doing this manually definitely becomes very tedious and boring. And is this the effective way of doing it? Not at all. So what do? We automate it. So this tells us why we automate. 1, for faster execution. 2, to be less error prone. And 3, the main reason is to help frequent execution of our test. So there are many tools available in the market today for automation. One such tool is Selenium. Birth of Selenium. Much before Selenium, there were various tools in the market, like say RFT and QTP, just to name a few popular ones. Selenium was introduced by a gentleman called Jason Huggins way back in 2004. He was an engineer at ThoughtWorks and he was working on a web application which needed frequent testing. He realized the inefficiency in manually testing this web application repeatedly. So what he did was he wrote a JavaScript program that automatically controlled the browser actions, and he named it as JavaScript Test Runner. Later, he made this open source and this was renamed as the Selenium Core. And this is how Selenium came into existence. And since then, Selenium has become one of the most powerful tools for testing web applications. So how does Selenium help? So we saw all the demerits of manual testing. So we can say by automation of test cases, one, Selenium helps in speedy execution of test cases. Since manual execution is avoided, the results are more accurate, no human errors. Since your test cases are automated, human resources required to execute automated test cases is far less than manual testing. Because of that, there is a lesser investment in human resources. It saves time, and you know time is money. It's cost effective as Selenium is an open source. It is available free of cost. Early time to market. Since you save effort and time on manual execution, your clients will be merrier as you would be able to ship your product pretty fast. Lastly, since your test cases are automated, you can rerun them any point of time and as many times as required. So if this tool offers so many benefits, we definitely want to know more detail about what Selenium is. Selenium enables us to test web applications on all kinds of browsers like Internet Explorer, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge, Opera, and even the headless browser. Selenium is an open source and it is platform independent. The biggest reason why people are preferring this tool is because it is free of cost. And the QTP and the RFT, which we talked about, are chargeable. Selenium is a set of tools and libraries to facilitate the automation of web application. As I said, it is not a single tool. It has multiple components, which we'll be seeing in detail in some time. And all these tools together help us test the web application. You can run Selenium scripts on any platform. It is platform independent. Why? Because it is primarily developed in JavaScript. It's very common for manual testers not to have in-depth programming knowledge. So Selenium has this record and replay back tool called the Selenium IDE, which can be used to create a set of actions as a script, and you can replay the script back. However, this is mainly used for demo purposes only, because Selenium is such a powerful tool that you should be able to take full advantage of all its features. Selenium provides support for different programming languages like Java, Python, C#, Ruby. So you can write your test scripts in any language you like. One need not know in-depth or advanced knowledge of these languages. Also, Selenium supports different operating systems. It has supports for Windows, Macs, Linux, even Ubuntu as well. So you can run your Selenium test on any platform of your choice. And hence, Selenium is the most popular and widely used automation tools for automating your web applications. Selenium set of tools. So let's go a little more deeper into Selenium. As I said, Selenium is not a single tool. It is a suite of tools. So let's look at some of the major components or the tools in Selenium and what they have to offer. So Selenium has 4 major components. 1. Selenium IDE. It's the most simplest tool in the suite of Selenium. It is integrated development environment. Earlier, Selenium IDE was available only as a Firefox plugin, and it offered a simple record and playback functionality. It is a very simple to use tool, but it's mainly used for prototyping and not used for creating automation in the real-time projects because it has its own limitations like any other record and replay tool. Selenium RC. This is nothing but Selenium Remote Control. It is used to write web application tests in different programming language. What it does, it basically interacts with the browser with the help of something called as RC server. And how it interacts is it uses a simple HTTP POST GET request for communication. This was also called as Selenium 1.0 version, but it got deprecated in Selenium 2.0 version and was completely removed in 3.0, and it was replaced by WebDriver. And we will see in detail as why this happened. Selenium WebDriver. This is the most important component in the Selenium suite. It is a programming interface to create and execute test cases. It is obviously the successor of the Selenium RC, which we talked about, because of certain drawbacks which RC had. So what WebDriver does is it interacts with the browsers directly, unlike RC, where the RC required a server to interact with the browser. And the last component is the Selenium Grid. So Selenium Grid is used to run multiple test scripts on multiple machines at the same time. So it helps you in achieving parallel execution. Since the Selenium WebDriver you can only do sequential execution, Grid is what comes into picture where you can do your parallel execution. And why is parallel execution important? Because in real-time environment, you always have the need to run test cases in a distributed environment. And that is what Grid helps you to achieve. So all this together helps us to create robust web application test automation. And we will go in detail about each of these components. So before that, let's look at the history of Selenium version. So what did Selenium version comprised of? It had an IDE, RC and Grid. And as I said earlier, there were some disadvantages of using RC. So RC was on its path of deprecation and WebDriver was taking its birth. So if you look at Selenium 2 version, it had an earlier version of WebDriver and also the RC. So they coexisted. From 3. onwards, RC was completely removed and WebDriver took its place. There is also a 4. version around the corner, and it has more features and enhancements. Some of the features which are talked about are W3C WebDriver standardization, improved IDE and improved Grid. Now let's look at each of the components in the Selenium suite. Selenium IDE is the most simplest tool in the suite of Selenium. It is nothing but an integrated development environment for creating your automation scripts. It has a record and playback functionality and is a very simple and easy to use tool. It is available as a Firefox plugin and a Chrome extension. So you can use either of this browser to record your test scripts. It's a very simple user interface using which you can create your scripts that interact with your browser. The commands created in the scripts are called Selenium commands and they can be exported to the supported programming language and hence this code can be reused. However, this is mainly used for prototyping and not used for creating automation for your real-time projects. Why? Because of its own limitation which any other record and replay tool has. So a bit history of Selenium IDE. So earlier Selenium IDE was only a Firefox extension. So we saw that IDE was available since the Selenium version 1. Selenium IDE died with the Firefox version 55. That was, IDE was stopped supporting from 55 version onwards. And this was around 2017 timeframe. However, very recently, all new brand Selenium IDE has been launched by Apply Tools. And also they have made it a cross-browser. So you can install the extension on Chrome as well as an add-on on Firefox browser. So they completely revamped this IDE code and now they have made it available on the GitHub under the Apache 2.0 license. And for the demos today, we'll be looking at the new IDE. Now with this new IDE also comes a good amount of features. Reusability of test cases, better debugger, and most importantly, it supports parallel test case execution. So they have introduced a utility called Selenium Side Runner that allows you to run your test cases on any browser. So you can create your automation using IDE, say on Chrome or Firefox, but through command prompt, using your Side Runner, you can execute these test cases on any browser, thus by achieving your cross-browser testing. Control flow statement. So initially in the previous versions of IDE, there were control flow statements available. However, one had to install a plugin to use them. But now it is made available out of box. And what are these control flow statements? These are nothing but your if-else conditions, the while loops, the switch case, and so on. It also has an improved locator functionality. That means it provides a failover mechanism for locating elements on your web page. So let's look at how this IDE looks and how do we install it and start working on that. So for that, let me take you to my browser. So say, let's go to the Firefox browser. So on this browser, I already have the IDE installed. So when you already have an IDE installed, you will see an icon here which says Selenium IDE. And how do you install this? You simply need to go to your Firefox add-ons. Here, where it says find more extension, so just type in Selenium IDE and search for this extension. So in the search results, you see this Selenium IDE, just click on that. And now since I've already installed, here it says remove. Otherwise, for you, it is going to give you an add button here. Just click on the add button. It will install this extension. Once it is installed, you should be able to see this Selenium IDE icon here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and launch this IDE. So when I click on that, it is going to show me a welcome page where it's going to give me a few options. The first option is, it says record a new test case in a new project. So straight away, if you choose this option, you can start recording a test case. In which case, it's going to just create a default project for you, which you can save it later. Then open an existing project. So you can open if you already have a saved project. Create a new project and close. So I already have an existing project with me for the demo purpose. So I'll go ahead and open that. So I'll say open existing project, and I have created a simple script. What the script does is it logs me into the Facebook using a dummy username and password. That's all. It's a very simple script with few lines, and this is what it's going to do. So what we will simply do is we'll just run the script and see how it works. For that, I'm just going to reduce the test execution speed so that you should be able to see every step of execution here. All right. So what I'll do now here is I'll just adjust this window and I'll just simply say run current test. All right. So I'll just get this side by side so that you should be able to see what exactly the script is doing. Okay. So now you're able to see both the windows. Okay. So now it's going to type in your user email here. There you go. And now it will enter the password and it has clicked on the login button. So it's going to take a while to say login, and since these are the dummy IDs, you are not able to log in here and you're going to see this error window. Fine, that is what is the expected output here. Now on the IDE, if you look here, after I execute the test case, every statement or every command which I have used here is colored coded in green. So that means this particular step was executed successfully. And then here in the log window, it will give you a complete log of this test case, right from the first step till the end. And your end result is, it says FB login, which is my test case name, completed successfully. Let's look at few components of this IDE. The first one is the menu bar. So let's go to our IDE. Alright, so the menu bar is right here on the top. So here is your project name. So either you can add a new project here or rename your project. So since we already have this project, which is named as Facebook. And then on the right, you have options to create a new project, open an existing project, or save the current project. And then comes our toolbar. So using the options in this toolbar, you can control the execution of your test cases. So first one here is the recording button. So this is what you use when you start recording your script. And then on the left, you have two options here to run your test cases. The first one is run all tests. So in case you have multiple test cases written here, you can execute them one by one sequentially by using this run all test. Else, what you can do is if you just want to run your current test, this is what you would use. Then IDE has this debugger option which you can use to do a step execution. So say for example, now whenever I run the scripts, it's going to execute each and every command here sequentially. So instead, if I just select the first command and say do step execution, all right, so what it does is the moment it finishes the first command, which is opening of Facebook, right, I think which is already done here. Yeah. Alright, so once this is done, it is going to wait immediately on the second command, and it says pause debugger. So from here, you can do whatever you would like to do. In case you want to change the command here, you can do that. You can pause your execution, you can resume your execution here, right? You can even completely stop your test execution, or you can just select this to run the rest of the test case. So if we say run the test case, what it is going to do is it's just going to simply go ahead and complete the test case. Now, there is another option here, which is, you see the timer there, which says test execution speed. So to execute your test cases in the speed you want. Say whenever you're developing an automation script, right, and say you want to give a demo. So you need to control the speed sometimes so that the viewer is able to exactly see all the steps which is being performed. And this gives you an option to control that complete execution, right? So do you see the grading here? So we have somewhere from fast to completely slow execution. So the previous demo which I showed was I controlled the speed and then I executed it so that we could see every command how it is being executed. Alright, so what's the next? This is called as an address bar. So whenever you enter an URL here, that is where you want to conduct your test. And another thing what it does is it keeps a history of all the URLs which you have used for running your test. Then here is where your script is recorded. So each and every instruction is displayed here in the order in which you have recorded the script. And then if you look here, you have something called as log and reference. So now log is an area where it records each and every step of your command as and when they get executed. right? So if you see here, it says open https facebook.com and OK. So that means this command was executed successfully. And after the complete test case is done, it gives you whether the test case passed or failed. So in case there is a failure, you'll immediately see this test case is failed in red color. Also, there is something called as reference here. For example, say if I click on any of this command, the reference tab, what it is going to show me is details of this command which I have used in the script. It gives you the details of the command as well as what the arguments have been used, or how is that you need to be using this particular command. Okay, so now what we'll do is let's go ahead and write a simple script using this IDE. So with this you'll get an idea as how do we actually record scripts in IDE. So for that I have a use case here, a very simple use case. So what we will do is we will open amazon.in, then we'll simply search for say product iPhone, and once we get that search page where all your iPhones are displayed, we will just do an assert on the title of the page. Simple. Alright, so let's do that. So first thing what I need is an URL. Okay, so first let me go to my Firefox browser here and say amazon.in. So why I'm doing this, just to simply get the right URL, absolute URL path here, and so that I don't make any mistakes while typing in the URL. Okay, so I got this. So let me close all these windows. I don't need any of this. Let's minimize this. Alright, so here what I'll do, in the tests tab, I'll say add a new test and name this test as Amazon search. Done. I'll say add. Now I'll enter this URL which I just copied it from my browser. Okay, and then I'll just say start recording. So what it did was, since I've entered the URL in this address box, it just opened the amazon.in URL. Now let's do our test case. So in my test case, what I said was I want to search for iPhone. Once I have this, I'm just going to click on my search button. So now this gives me a list of all iPhones. And then I said I want to add an assertion on the title of this page. So for me to do that, what IDE gives me an option is I have to just right click anywhere on this page and you'll see the Selenium IDE options here. So in this, I will select assert title and then I will close this browser. So that kind of completes my test case. So now take a look at all the steps which is created for me. So it says open / because I've already provided the URL here. So either you can replace it with your regular URL or you can just leave it as it is. So what I will do, since this is going to be a proper script and I might be using this to run it from my command prompt also. So I'll just replace this target with the actual URL. And then what it is doing, it is setting a window size. Then there are whatever I did on that particular URL on that website, it has recorded all the steps for me. So this is where it says type into this particular text box, which is my search box. And what did it type? iPhone. This was the value which I entered. Now there was one more feature which I told you in this new IDE, which I said it has a failover mechanism for your locating techniques. Now that is what this is. Now if you look here, this ID is equal to tab search text box. This is nothing but that search box where we entered the text iPhone. And it has certain identification through which this IDE identifies that web element. And that has multiple options to select that particular search box. So right now what it has used is ID is equal to tab search box. However, if you know the different locating techniques, you will be able to see here that it has other techniques also which it has identified, like the name and the CSS and the XPath. So how does this help in failover is, say tomorrow if amazon.in website changes the ID of this element, right? You are not going to come and rewrite the scripts again. Instead, by using the same script, what it will do is, if this particular ID fails, if it is unable to find the element using the first locator, which is the ID, it simply moves to the next available ones and it tries to search for that element until one of these becomes true. That is what was the failure mechanism which has got added now. It's a very brilliant feature because most of our test cases break because of element location techniques. Well, let's come back to this. So then we added an assert title, right? So what is assert title here? It simply captures the title of that particular page and it checks. This is all. A very simple test case. So what we will do now is we will stop the recording and then I've also given a close browser. So right now what I'll do is I'll just comment this out. Why? Because if I just run this test case, it's going to be very fast and you might not be able to catch the exact command execution what has happened. Alright, so right now I'll just disable it, so that it will just do all these test cases and it just stays there without closing the browser. So now I'll just say run the current test case. So your Amazon in is launched. Okay, it is typed in the iPhone. It's also clicked on the search. So it is done. So now if you look here, since we are in the reference tab, it is not able to show. So let's go to the log. And now let's see the log. So it's going to be a running log. So if you notice here, the previous examples which we have run for Facebook is also in the same log. So we will have to see the log from running Amazon search because that's our test case. So if you see here, every command line, right, was executed successfully. Assert title was also done and your test case was executed successfully. So it passed. Now what we will do is on this assert title, I'll just modify this and let's say just add some text. I'll just add double S here. Now this by intentionally I'm going to fail this test case just to show you that whenever there is a test case failure, how does the IDE behaves and how do you get to know the failures. Alright. So I'll just run the test case again. So before that, let's close the previous window. Alright, done. And now here I'll also uncomment the close because anyway it's a failure which I'm going to see, which I should be able to see it in the logs. So I'll close the browser after the execution of test case. Okay, so let's simply go and run the test case. Okay, Amazon.in is launched. It should search for iPhone now. Yeah, there you go. All right, now it should also close the browser. Yes, it has closed the browser and it has failed. Now see here. Now this is the line where our command failed. Why? Because the expected title was not there. And if you look in the logs, it says your assert title on Amazon.in failed. Actual result was something different and it did not match with what we had asked it for. So this is how simple it is to use your IDE to create your automation scripts. So we saw all the components of IDE. We saw the record button, then I showed you the toolbar, I showed you the editor box and also the test execution log. So now let's come to what are the limitations of this IDE. With IDE, you cannot export your scripts, your test scripts to WebDriver scripts. This support is not yet added, but it is in the works. Data-driven testing, like using your Excel files or reading data from the CSV files and passing it to the script, this capability is still not available. Also, you cannot connect to database for reading your test data or perform any kind of database testing. With Selenium WebDriver, yes, you can. Also, unlike Selenium WebDriver, you do not have a good reporting mechanism with the IDE, like say for example, TestNG or ReportNG. So that brings us to the next component of the suite, which is Selenium RC, Selenium Remote Control. So Selenium RC was developed by Paul Hammond. He refactored the code which was developed by Jason and was credited with Jason as a co-creator of Selenium. Selenium Server is written in Java. It is used to write web application tests in different programming languages, as it supports multiple programming languages like your Java, C#, Perl, Python and Ruby. It interacts with the browser with the help of an RC server. So this RC server uses a simple HTTP GET and POST request for communication. And as I said earlier also, Selenium RC was called as Selenium 1.0 version. But it got deprecated in Selenium 2.0 and was completely removed in 3.0 and it got replaced by what? WebDriver. And we'll see why this happened and what was that issue which we had with the RC server. So this is the architecture of Selenium remote control at a very high level. So when Jason Huggins introduced Selenium, you know the tool was called as JavaScript program. And then that was also called as a Selenium core. So every HTML has a JavaScript statements which are executed by web browser, and there is a JavaScript engine which helps in executing this command. Now this RC had one major issue. Now what was that issue? Say for example, you have a test script, say test.javascript here, which you are trying to access elements from anywhere from the google.com domain. So what used to happen is every element which is accessible are the elements which can belong only to google.com domain. Like say for example, mail, the search or the drive. So any elements from this can be accessible through your test scripts. However, nothing outside the domain of say google.com in this case was accessible. Say for example, if your test scripts wanted to access something from yahoo.com, this was not possible. And this is due to the security reasons, obviously. Now to overcome that, the testers, what they had to do was they had to install the Selenium core and the web server, which contained your web application which is under test on the same machine. And imagine if you have to do this for every machine which is under test. This is not going to be feasible or even effective all the time. And this issue is called as a same origin policy. Now what a same origin policy issue says is it prohibits a JavaScript from accessing elements or interacting with scripts from a domain different from where it is launched. And this is purely for the security measure. So if you have written a scripts which can access your google.com or anything related to google.com, these scripts cannot access any elements outside the domain. Like as we said in the example yahoo.com. This was the same origin policy. Now to overcome this, what this gentleman did was he created something called as Selenium Remote Control Server to trick the browser in believing that your core, your Selenium core and your web application under test are from the same domain. And this is what was the Selenium Remote Control. So if you look at again a high level architecture or how did this actually work, first you write your test scripts, which is here, right, in any of the supported language like your PHP or your Java or Python. And before we start testing, we need to launch this RC server, which is a separate application. So this Selenium server is responsible for receiving the Selenium commands. And these Selenium commands are the ones which you have written in your script. It interprets them and reports the result back to your test. So all that is done through your RC server. The browser interaction which happens through RC server, right, from here to your browser. So this happens through a simple HTTP and post and get request. And that is how your RC server and your browser communicate. And how exactly this communication happens? This RC server, it acts like a proxy. So say your test scripts asks to launch a browser. So what happens is this commands goes to your server and then your RC server launches the browser. It injects the JavaScript into the browser. Once this is done, all the subsequent calls from your test script, right, from your test scripts to your browser goes through your RC. And now upon receiving these instructions, your Selenium core executes these actual commands as JavaScript commands on the browser. And then the test results are displayed back from your browser to your RC to your test scripts. So the same cycle gets repeated, right, until the complete test case execution is over. So for every command what you write in your JavaScript here or your test script here goes through a complete cycle of going through the RC server to the browser, collecting the results again from the RC server back to your test scripts. So this cycle gets repeated for every command until your complete test execution is done. So RC had definitely a lot of shortcomings, and what are those? So RC server needs to be installed before running any test scripts, which we just saw. So that was an additional setup since it acts as a mediator between your commands, which is your Selenium commands, and your browser. The architecture of RC is complicated. Why? Because of its intermediate RC server, which is required to communicate with the browser. The execution of commands takes very long. It is slower. We know why. Because every command in this takes a full trip from the test script to your RC server, to the core engine, to the browser, and then back to the same route, which makes your overall test execution very slow. Lastly, the APIs supported by RC are very redundant and confusing. So RC does have a good number of APIs. However, it is less object oriented. So they are redundant and confusing. Say for example, say if you want to write into a text box, how and when to use a type key command or just a type command is always confusing. Another example is some of the mouse commands, using a click or a mouse down. Both kind of, almost providing a similar functionality. So that is the kind of confusion which developers used to create. Hence, Selenium RC got deprecated and is no more available in latest Selenium versions. It is obsolete now. Now to overcome these shortfalls, WebDriver was introduced. So while RC was introduced in 2004, WebDriver was introduced by Simon Stewart in 2006. It's a cross-platform testing platform. So WebDriver can run on any platform like say Linux, Windows, Mac, or even if you have a Ubuntu machine, you can run your Selenium scripts on this machine. It is a programming interface to run test cases. It is not an IDE. And how does this work actually? So test cases are created and executed using web elements or objects using the object locator and the WebDriver methods. So when I do a demo, you will understand what these WebDriver methods are and how do we locate the web elements on the web page. It does not require a core engine like RC. So it is pretty fast. Why? Because WebDriver interacts directly with the browser and it does not have that intermediate server like the RC had. So each browser, in this case, what happens is each browser has its own driver on which the application runs. And this driver is responsible to make the browser understand the commands which you will be passing from the script. Like say for example, click of a button or you want to enter some text. So through your script, you tell which browser you want to work with, say Chrome, And then the Chrome driver is responsible for interpreting your instructions and to execute it on the web application launched on the Chrome browser. So like RC, WebDriver also supports multiple programming languages in which you can write your test scripts. So another advantage of WebDriver is it supports various frameworks like TestNG, JUnit, NUnit and ReportNG. So when we talk about the limitations of WebDriver, you will appreciate how this support for various frameworks and tools help in making the Selenium a complete automation solution for web application. So let's look at the architecture of WebDriver at a high level. What is in WebDriver? So WebDriver consists of 4 major components. The first one is we have got client libraries, right? Or what we also call it as language bindings. So since Selenium supports multiple languages and you're free to use any of the supported languages to create your automation script, these libraries are made available on your Selenium website, which you need to download and then write your scripts accordingly. So let's go and see from where do we download this. So if I go to my browser, so seleniumhq.org, right? So if you're working with Selenium, this website is your Bible. So anything and everything you need to know about Selenium, right? You need to come here and use all the tabs here in this website. So right now what we are going to look at is what are those language bindings. So for that, I'll have to go to this download tab here, okay? And if you scroll down here, you will see something like Selenium client and WebDriver language bindings. And for each of the supported language of Selenium, you have a download link, right? So say for example, if you're working with Java here, what you need to do is you need to download your Java language binding. So let's go back to the presentation. So this is where your language bindings are available. Next, so Selenium provides lots of APIs for us to interact with the browser. And when we do the demo, I'll be showing you some of these APIs, right? And these are nothing but the REST APIs. And everything, whatever we do through the script happens through the REST calls. Then we have a JSON wire protocol. What is JSON? JavaScript Object Notation. It is nothing but a standard for exchanging data over the web. So for example, you want to say launch a web application through your script. So what Selenium does it creates a JSON payload and posts the request to the browser driver. That is here. And then we have this browser drivers themselves. And as I said, there is a specific driver for each browser. As you know, every tool has its own limitation. So does Selenium. So let's look at what these limitations are and if there are any workarounds for them. Cannot test mobile applications requires framework like APM. Selenium is for automating web application. It cannot handle mobile applications. Mobile applications are a little different and they need its own set of automation tool. However, what Selenium provides is a support for integrating this APM tool, which is nothing but a mobile application automation tool. And using APM and Selenium, you can still achieve mobile application automation. And when do you usually need this? When your application under test is also supported on mobile devices, you would want a mechanism to run the same test cases on web browser as well as your mobile browsers, right? So this is how you achieve it. The next limitation, so when we talked about the components of Selenium, I said that with WebDriver, we can achieve only sequential execution. However, in real-time scenario, we cannot just live with this. We need to have a mechanism to run our test cases parallelly on multiple machines as well as on multiple browsers. So though this is a limitation of WebDriver, but what Selenium offers is something called as Grid, which helps us achieve this. And we will see in shortly what the Selenium Grid is all about. Also, if you want to know more details as how do we work with the grid, how do you want to install that grid, so do check out our video on Simplilearn website on Selenium Grid. Third limitation, so limited reporting capability. So Selenium WebDriver has a limited reporting capability. It can create basic reports, but what we definitely need is a more. So it does support some tools like say TestNG, ReportNG and even extent reports, which you can integrate with Selenium and generate beautiful reports. Powerful, isn't it? Also, there are other challenges with Selenium, like Selenium is not very good with image testing, especially for the ones which are designed for web application automation. But then we have other tools which can be used along with Selenium like AutoIt and Securely. So if you look at all this, Selenium still provides a complete solution for your automation needs. And that's the beauty of Selenium, and that is why it makes the most popular tool of today for automation. Okay, let's do a quick comparison between the Selenium RC and the WebDriver. So RC has a very complex architecture. You know why? Because of the additional RC server. Whereas due to direct interaction with the browser, WebDriver architecture is pretty simple. Execution speed. It is slower in RC and much faster in WebDriver. Why? Because in WebDriver we have eliminated that complete layer of Selenium server, right? That the RC server, and we established a direct communication with the browser through browser drivers. It requires an RC server to interact with the browsers. We just talked about it, and whereas WebDriver can directly interact with the browser. So RC, again, we talked about this as one of the limitations, that we have a lot of redundant APIs, which kept developers guessing as which API to use for what functionality. However, WebDriver offers pretty clean APIs to work with. RC did not offer any support for headless browser, whereas in WebDriver you do have a support for using headless browsers. Let's see the WebDriver in action now. Now for the demo, we will use this particular use case, and what this use case says is navigate to the official Simplilearn website, then type the Selenium in search bar and click on it, and click on the Selenium 3.0 training. So we are basically searching for Selenium 3.0 training on the Simplilearn website. First, let's do the steps manually, and then we will go ahead and write the automation script. So let's go to my browser. On my browser, what I'll do is let me first launch the Simplilearn website. Okay, and here what my use case step says is I need to search for Selenium and click on the search button. So once I do that, it is going to give me a complete list of all kind of Selenium trainings which is available with Simplilearn. And what I'm interested in is the Selenium 3.0 training here. Once I find this on the web page, I need to go and click on that. Alright. So this is all the steps which we are going to perform in this use case. Okay. Now, so for writing the test cases, I'll be using an IDE which is Eclipse. I've already installed my Eclipse, and also I have installed Selenium in this instance of my Eclipse. Alright, so if you can see the reference library folder here, you will see all the jars which are required for the Selenium to work. Next, another prereq which is required for Selenium, and that is your driver files. Now, every browser which you want to work with has its own driver file to execute your Selenium scripts. And since for this demo, I'll be working with the Firefox browser, I will need a driver file for Firefox. Now, driver file for Firefox is the Gecko driver, which I have already downloaded and placed in my folder called drivers. Now, where did I download this from? Let's go ahead and see that. So if I go back to my browser, and if you go to your seleniumhq.website, you have to go to this download tab here. In the download tab, when you scroll down, you will see something like third-party drivers, bindings and plugins. In this, you will see the list of all the browsers which is supported by Selenium. And against each of this browser, you will find a link which has the driver files. Now, since we'll be using the Gecko driver, this is the link where you need to go to, and depending on which operating system which you're working on, you need to download that particular file. Now, since I'm working on Mac, this is the file which I'm using. If you're a Windows user, you need to download this zip file and unzip it. So once you unzip that, you would get a file called Gecko driver for your Firefox or a Chrome driver for your Chrome browser. And then what you do is you just create a directory called drivers under your project and just place the driver files here. So these are the two prereqs for your Selenium. One is importing your jar files like this, and then having your drivers downloaded and keep them under a folder where you can reference to. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and create a class. I already have a package created in this project, so I'll use this project and create a new class. So I'll say create new Java class, and let's call this as search training. I'll be using a public static void main, and I'll click on finish. So let's remove this auto generated lines as we do not need them. Alright, now the first statement which you need to write before even you start writing the rest of your code is what you need to do is you need to define or declare your driver variable using your class WebDriver. So what I would do is I'll say WebDriver driver. Done. Alright. Now you will see that this IDE is going to flash some errors for you. That means it is going to ask you to import certain libraries which is required by the WebDriver. So simply just go ahead and say import WebDriver from org.opensq.selenium. This is the package which we will need. Alright. So you have a driver created which is of the class WebDriver. And now after this I'm going to create 3 methods. Alright. So first method I will have for launching the Firefox browser. Okay. And then I will write a simple method for searching Selenium training and clicking on it. This is the actual use case what we'll be doing. And then third method I'm going to write is just to close the browser which I'm going to be opening, right? So these are the different methods which I'll be creating, and from the public static void main I will just call these methods one after the other. Okay, so let's go ahead and write the first method. Now my first method is launching the Firefox browser. So I'll say public void, since my return type is null or there is no return type for this, let's call it as launch browser. Okay, all right. Now in this, for launching any browser, I need to mention 2 steps. Now the first step is where I need to do a system.set property. Okay, let's do that first and then I'll explain what this does. I'll just say system.set property. So this accepts a key and a value pair. So what is my key here? My key here is webdriver.gecko.driver, and I need to provide a value. So value is nothing but the path to the Gecko driver. And we know that this Gecko driver which I'm going to use here is right here in the same project path under the drivers folder, correct? And that is what the path which I'm going to provide here. So here simply I need to say drivers/Gecko driver. Gecko. All right. Done. And let me close this sentence. Alright. Now since I'm a Mac user, my Gecko driver installable is just the name Gecko driver. If you're a Windows user and if you're running your Selenium scripts on the Windows machine, you need to provide a complete path to this, including .exe, because driver executable on your machines is going to be gecko driver.exe. Alright. So just make sure that your path which you mentioned here in the system.set property is the correct path. Okay. Then the next thing what we need to do is I need to just say driver is equal to new Firefox driver. Okay, so this command new Firefox driver creates an instance of the Firefox browser. Now this is also flagging me error. Why? Because again it's going to ask me to import the packages where the Firefox driver class is present. Okay, we did that. Now these 2 lines are responsible for launching the Firefox browser form. So this is done. So what's my next step in the use case? Now I need to launch the website Simplilearn. So for that we have a command called driver.get. Driver.get, what it does is whatever URL you're going to give it here in this double quotes as an argument, it is going to launch that particular website. And for us, it's a Simplilearn website. So what I do as a best practice is instead of typing out the URL, I go to my browser, launch that URL which I want to test, and I simply copy it. Come back to your Eclipse and just simply paste it. So this ensures that I do not make any mistakes in the URL. Okay, so done. So our first method is ready where we are launching the browser, which is our Firefox browser, and then launching the Simplilearn website. Now the next method. What is my next method? In my next method, I need to give the search string to search Selenium training on this particular website. Now for that we need to do few things. What are those few things? Let's go to the website again. All right, so let me relaunch this. Let's close this. Okay, let me remove all this and let's go to the home page first. Okay, this is my home page. So as you saw when I did a manual testing of this, I entered the text here. So now since I have to write a script for this, first I need to identify what this element is. For that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say right click here and I'll say inspect element. Alright, now this element, let's see what attribute it has which I can use for finding this element. So I see that there is an ID present. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply use this ID and then I'll just copy this ID from here. Go back to Eclipse. Let's write a method first. So I'll say public void, and what do we give the method name? Say search training or just search. Alright, now in this I need to use a command called driver.findElement by ID is what I'm going to use as a locating technique, and in double quotes the ID which I copied from the website is what I'm going to paste here. Okay, and then what am I going to do on this element is I need to send that text, the text which I'm going to search for, which is Selenium. So I'll just say send keys, and whatever text I want to send, I need to give it in double quotes. So for that Selenium. So this is done. So now I've entered the text here, and after entering the text, I need to click on this button. So for that, I need to first know what that button is. So let's inspect that search button. Okay. Now, if you look at the search button, other than the tag, which is span, and the class name, I do not have anything here. Alright. So what I can do is I can either use the class name or I can write an XPath. Since this is a demo which we have already used ID locating technique, I would go ahead and use the XPath here. So for me to construct an XPath, I will copy this class first. Okay. And then I already have a crow path installed on my Firefox. So I'll use the crow path and first test my XPath. So I'll just say /. Let's see what was that element. It has a span tag. Okay, so I'll have to use span and at class equal to, and I'll just copy the class name here. And let's see if it can identify that element. Yeah, so it is able to identify. So I'll just use this XPath in my code. So I'll go back to Eclipse and I'll say driver.findElement by.xpath. And the XPath which I just copied from crowpath is what I'm going to paste here. And what is the action I need to do here? I need to say click. Done. So I have reached a stage where I've entered this Selenium. Okay. And then I have clicked on the search button. Once I do this, I know that expected result is I should be able to find this particular link here, Selenium 3.0 training. Okay. And I should be able to click on that. So for that, again, I need to inspect this. So let's inspect this Selenium 3.0. Alright, so now what are the elements this has? Now this particular element has attributes like it has a tag h2, then it has got some class name and some other attributes. So I would like to use a XPath here. Now this time while using the XPath, I'm going to make use of a text functionality so that I can search for this particular text. So I'll simply copy this. I'll go to my crow path. The tag is h2. So I'll say simply h2. Okay, and here I'll say text equal to, and this is the text which I copied. I missed out that yes there, so I'm just going to add an S. Okay, so let's first test here whether it is able to identify that element. Yeah, so it is able to identify. So can you see here blue dotted line? It is able to show us which element it is identified. So I'll copy this XPath now and let's go to my IDE Eclipse. So now here what I need to do is I'll have to again simply say driver.findElement by.xpath and paste the XPath which we just did, and then again I have to do a click operation. Done. Alright. So technically we have taken all the steps of the use case and we have written the commands for that. Alright. Now let's add an additional thing here. Say after coming to this page, after finding this, we want to say print the title of this page. Now what is the title of this page? If you just hover your mouse on this, it says online and classroom training for professional certification courses, Simplilearn. So what I will do is after doing all these operations, I will just print out this page title on our console. So for that, I have to just do this driver dot. So let's do a sysout. So I'll say sysout system.out.println. Okay, and here I would say let's add a text here. The page title is, and then let's append it with driver.getTitle. So this is the command which we'll be using to fetch the page title. Done. Now what is the last method I need to add? Just to close the browser. Alright, so let me add a method here. I'll say public void close browser, and it's a one single command which I need to call. I'll say driver.quit. Okay, and then I need to call all these methods from my public static void main. So let me use my class name, which is this. So I'm going to create an object obj is equal to new class name, and then using this object, first is I need to call the method launch browser, and then I'll call the method search, right, and then I'll call the method close browser. Done. So technically our script is ready with all the functionality which we wanted to cover from our use case. Now there are few other tweaks which I need to do this, and I'll tell you why I need to do this. Now for example, after we click here, right, after we click on the search, if you observed on your website, it took a little while before it listed out all the Selenium trainings for us. And usually when you're actually doing it, you wait for the Selenium 3.0 training to be available and then you click on that. Now same thing, you also need to tell your scripts to do that. You need to tell your scripts to wait for a while until you start seeing the Selenium 3.0 training or it appears on your web page. There are multiple ways to do that in your script, and it is a part of overall synchronization, what we call. where we use kind of implicit and explicit kind of awaits. Now since this is a demo, for demo purpose, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a command called thread.sleep, and I'm just going to give an explicit wait of say 3 seconds. So you can use this mainly for the demo purposes. So you can use a thread.sleep command. Now this thread.sleep command needs us to handle some exceptions. So I'm just going to click on add throws declaration and say interrupted exception. Now same thing, I'll have to do it in my main function also. Okay, so let's do that and complete it. Alright, so this is done. So by doing this, what am I doing? I'm ensuring that before I click on the Selenium 3.training, we are giving enough time for the script to wait until the web page shows this link to the Selenium 3.0 training. That's one thing I'm doing. Alright, and also now since you're going to be seeing this demo through the video recording, the script when it starts running, it is going to be very fast. So you might just miss out seeing how it does the send keys and how did it click on the search button. For us to enable us to see it properly, I'll just add some explicit waits here just for our demo purpose. So after entering the keys, right, so what I'll do is I'll just give a simple thread.sleep here. Okay, so probably a 3 seconds or a 2 seconds wait should be good enough. Okay, a 3 seconds wait should be good enough here so that we should be able to see how exactly this works on your browser when we execute this. Okay, now our complete script is ready. So what I'll do is I'll just save the script and then we will simply run the script. So to run the script, I'll just say right click, run as Java application. Okay, it says asks me to select and save. I've saved the script now. So let's observe how it runs. Okay, the Simplilearn.com, the website is launched. So the Selenium text has been entered in the search box. It has clicked on the search. Okay, all right. So now it did everything whatever we wanted it to do. All right. So since we are closing the browser, you were unable to see whether the Selenium 3.training was selected or not. However, what I have given here is to fetch the title after all these operations were complete. And if you see here, the complete operations was done and we were able to see the page title here. Okay. So now what I'll do, since we are unable to see whether it clicked on the Selenium 3.0 training or not, I'll just comment out the close browser, the command. Okay, so we will not call the close browser so that the browser remains open and we get to see whether did it really find the training link or not. Okay, so let me close this window. We don't need this Firefox window. Close all tabs and then I'll just re-execute this script. So I'll say run as Java application. So save the file. Okay, Simplilearn.com is launched. So search text is entered. Now it's going to click on the search button. Yes. Alright, so we have got the search results. It should click on Selenium 3.0 training and yes, it is successfully able to click on that. Alright, so now it's not going to close the browser because we have commented on that line. However, it did print us the title here. Alright, so this is a simple way of using the Selenium scripts. Selenium Grid. So Grid is used to run multiple test scripts on multiple machines at the same time. With WebDriver, you can only do sequential execution, but in real-time environment, you always have the need to run test cases in distributed environment, and that is where Selenium Grid comes into picture. So Grid was conceptualized and developed by Patrick. The main objective is to minimize test execution time, and how? By running your test parallelly. So design is in such a way that commands are distributed on multiple machines where you want to run test, and all these are executed simultaneously. What do you achieve by this methodology? Of course, the parallel execution on different browsers and operating systems. Grid is pretty flexible and can integrate with many tools, like say you want a reporting tool integrated to pull all the reports from the multiple machines where you're running your test cases, and you want to present that report in a good looking format. So you have an option to integrate such report. Okay, so how does this Grid work? So Grid has a hub and node concept which helps in achieving the parallel execution. Let's take an example. Say your application supports all browsers and most of the operating systems. Like as in this picture, you could say one of them is a Windows machine, one of them is a Mac machine, and another one is say a Linux machine. So your requirement is to run the test on all supported browsers and operating systems, like the one which is depicted in this picture. So what you have to do is, first thing is you configure a master machine, or what you also call it as a hub, by running something called a Selenium standalone server. And this standalone server can be downloaded from the Selenium HQ website. Using the server, you create a hub configuration, that is this node. And then You create nodes specific to your machine requirement. And how are these nodes created? You again use the same server, which is your standalone Selenium server, to create the node configuration. So I'll show you where the Selenium server can be downloaded. So if we go back to our Selenium HQ website, so you can see here right on the top, it says Selenium standalone server. And this is the latest version available, so you just need to download. Once you download this, keep a version of this one on your master machine, that is your hub, and this should also be present on your node machines. And there is a certain command which you can use to install this server as a node and as a master depending on your configuration. So once that is done, you have your master or the hub and the nodes created. Your master can control on which nodes you want to execute test. Now say if this is a Mac machine, this is a Windows machine, through your master or your hub, you control on which machine you want to execute what tests. Then also you could have a multiple combination of tests. Like say for example, smoke test to be run on all these nodes. That's the kind of configuration you can create. Or a certain component test to be run on say only Windows 10 with an Edge browser. Or say regression test on Mac machine. So any such things, whatever configurations you have for your node, what happens is the hub picks the right node which conforms to your requirements or the configurations which you have set up, and then sends a command to the node to execute those test cases on the node. Everything is controlled through your master machine only here. What happens on the node? So once the node gets the command from the master, the node actually runs all the test cases which it intends to run on the specific browser which you have mentioned in your configuration file. So this is a very high level architecture and how a grid works. So if you want to know more details of how the grid works, you can refer to our video on Simplilearn. Alright, again, limitations. So what limitation does this grid have now? The first one, it has relatively poor scalability compared to many modern applications. It is pretty static. Each server is configured in advance with a subset of required browser instances available. So if you want to vary this, you will need to reconfigure. So any configuration tomorrow on any machines you want to change, it cannot be done automatically. You need to completely reconfigure that node and then add it back to the grid. Thirdly, although it is available to run on virtual servers, it is actually not designed as a cloud native application. And as a result of this, it isn't optimized to take advantage of things like say distributed storage or dynamic scaling or even automatic failover. So these are some of the limitations of the grid. Advantages of Selenium: speed and accuracy. Of course, since there is no manual execution, your test can run faster, and with grid, it helps in parallel execution, and you can run or execute large volumes of tests within a very short time frame. Let's take an example. Say just before the release of your product, say during the last lap of your testing, you find a bug, and of course it has to be fixed. So the developer fixes the bug, and you want to run all the test cases pertaining to that area. Now, can you imagine that if you have to do this testing manually, how long it's going to take? So by automation, you can achieve this in a very short duration of time, and it will also help you release your product in time with very minimal or absolutely no human errors. The second advantage, it's an open source, so it's available free of cost, so anyone can download it and start using it. It supports wide spectrum of programming languages we have been seeing throughout this presentation. It is not restricted to any particular programming language. So whatever language you are comfortable with, you have an option to use that and write your Selenium scripts. Selenium has support for almost all browsers and operating systems. We also talked about headless browser support. So this helps you create test cases once using any of the browser and run them across all browsers and all operating systems, thus saving you a lot of time from manual execution and helping in achieving a very broad test coverage. And we also saw that pretty easy to use tool, right? So you can check out all our videos, and it's just a matter of time that you can master the skill of writing your automation scripts. Reusability. Of course, like any programming language, it provides you a mechanism to reuse your code and avoid redundancy. Well, again, let's see an overall what are the limitations of Selenium itself. Now, since Selenium is open source, that is one of the biggest advantage. Now, there is a little disadvantage which comes with that. And what is it? You do not have much technical support because it's an open source code. However, there are loads and loads of documentations and forums available which you can definitely refer to. And Selenium, as we said, it is only for automating web applications. It cannot handle the mobile applications or even the desktop application. However, it does provide support for integrating tools like APM for mobile testing. Selenium is not very good with image testing, especially designed for your web application tools. Again, we have tools like AutoIt and Securely which can be integrated with Selenium. Selenium WebDriver has limited reporting capability, but again, it does provide us support for integrating tools like TestNG, ReportNG and Extend Report. It does not have test management capabilities. It need not, right? Not one tool need not have each and everything what is required, but there is always a way to integrate it. So Selenium does provide a way to integrate any of the test management tools. Now, since Selenium supports multiple programming languages, the developer of test automation will require to have some basic knowledge of any of the programming language it supports to write effective automation scripts. Right? So this you could look at it as an advantage or as a disadvantage. So overall, if you look at all this, right, Selenium still provides a complete solution for our automation need. And that is why we can still say that Selenium is one of the most popular tool used in the industry today for your web application automation. Alright, key takeaways. So overall in this presentation, we saw the disadvantages of manual testing, what pushed us to look at automation, and then we saw one of the most powerful tool available today for automating web application, that is Selenium. So we looked at different components of the Selenium, what it comprises of, how does the grid help us, how does the WebDriver work, and also we had a small demo on how do we use the WebDriver. And then as any other tool has its own disadvantages and limitations, we did a deep dive into what kind of advantages Selenium provides and also what are the limitations and a workaround for these limitations. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you like this video and do look out for more videos from Simplilearn on Selenium. Thank you very much.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.